This is Whitley Strieber, and this is Dreamland. You have reached the edge of the world. A new pope has been elected, and that brings John Hogue of HogueProphecy.com back to Coast AM and to Dreamland. On Coast to Coast AM on Wednesday night, John talked a little bit about the prophecy of St. Malachi and just touched on what happened to Pope Paul. We're going to just go over briefly the prophecy of St. Malachi and then talk about some extraordinary dangers that this new pope may be facing that so far I don't think anybody has really put two and two together about it, but boy, is it ever time. And for subscribers, we're going even deeper into the very unusual astrological situation that has accompanied both the resignation of Pope Benedict and the accession of Pope Francis. These are strange times. And not only that, there's a scandal of unparalleled proportions brewing in the Vatican, something called the narration, an investigation set up by Pope Benedict, run by a Jesuit cardinal, and the new pope is also a Jesuit. The Curia of the Roman Catholic Church, the most ancient governing body on earth, is terrified of this pope, and that's going to have all kinds of repercussions, you can be sure. Is the Catholic Church even going to survive in its present form? What does the prophecy of St. Malachi actually mean in terms of the changes that must be coming in Catholicism? We'll get into all of that in the subscriber area as well. But first, I'd like to welcome John Hogue to Dreamland. John, glad to have you with us.
Thanks for having me on, Whitley.
Okay, the prophecy of St. Malachi. Peter the Roman from Buenos Aires?
Well, the prophecy in brief is attributed to St. Malachi, an Irish saint, back around 1139. He made the prediction. And to make a long story short, it looks like this prediction, which was discovered, quote-unquote, in 1595 and published in Lignum Vitae, which was a very large book on Benedictine history, even though St. Malachi was a Celestine order monk. It's basically under the pseudonym of St. Malachi. There was this man who wrote these prophecies in 1590s that although the 70 or so mottos, Latin mottos that are supposed to show the evolution of each pope, each pontificate until Judgment Day, although those seem to have all their clues perfect, the ones that come after publication, though not perfect, are upwards of 90% accurate, which is an accuracy rate that's just very rare in prophecy. And they get more accurate as they get towards the final popes. Now, just a quick example of how the mottos work. They are talking about the name of the Pope or his Christian name or some act in his pontificacy that's significant or an enemy that he has in his pontificacy. You have, for instance, John Paul II called De Labora Solis in medieval Latin, which means from the sun's eclipse. John Paul II was born on a total eclipse in 1920, and he was interred under the St. Peter's Basilica in his tomb on an annular eclipse in April of 2005. So the next pope that follows is Ratzinger. As Benedict XVI, he is De Gloria Olivae, from the glory of the olive. Now, the Olivetans are a Benedictine order, so ergo Benedict is implied in the name. And also, this order is supposed to prepare the world for the revelations of Jesus Christ's small apocalypse, his Sermon on the Mount of Olives, which those people who've read your Bible, you know that it is fundamentally a crisis, an apostasy of faith, and a test of Christian faith. That is the main engine of the dark days coming at the end times. So with that in mind, many prophecy watchers in the Catholic Church and myself have looked at Benedict as an afflicted pope, that there would be many scandals, that indeed the crisis of the church at the very highest order, from its curia and above to its popes, would be compromised in spiritual crisis, sexual scandals, all the things that have happened, the continuation of drug money laundering that has gone ongoing even since the mysterious death of John Paul I. On the day he was going to expose it, the Vatican Bank crisis.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. It was Pope Paul.
John Paul I was the one who died mysteriously after Paul VI died.
Oh, that's right. He was only Pope for a very short time. Tell us exactly what he had in his possession at the time of his death.
He had a list of people that were to be fired and transferred to other areas of the Vatican because of a drug money laundering scandal that was upwards of $500 million a year of mafia drug money and neo-fascist money was from P2 and other organizations were using the Vatican to hide the money, launder it, and have it come out another way. So he was going to close the door on all of that from his end, which was the Vatican Bank. And he was found by his servant nurse, his servant nun, dead in his bed with the papers spread all over his body and on the floor. When Cardinal Villot, the Secretary of State of the Curia, came in, he immediately disposed of the Pope's Effertil bottle for his low blood pressure. He immediately disposed of his jar of jelly beans he liked to have, and rushed the body as soon as possible, even with the press questioning whether it should be an autopsy because of the strange nature of the death of the Pope. Said there's never, ever been a Pope that's had an autopsy, which, by the way, is a lie, that this did happen in the early 19th century when there was a suspicion of a Pope being poisoned. So he lied and then made sure that the Pope was embalmed so that no evidence would be surviving. And then about 6 months into John Paul II's reign, the next Pope, Cardinal Villot suddenly dies. And along with him die all the mafia contacts of the Vatican Bank.
Now, when you say die, you mean he had the information.
He had the information.
The actual people didn't die.
Well, he had the information, and he retired and then died of bronchitis.
Right.
And he's one of the coincidental, if not uncoincidental, strange deaths that happened to a lot of the people outside of the Vatican. But you can't tell who died after that in the Vatican, but outside of the Vatican, all the mafia organizations that were involved, one by one, every witness that was involved on that side of the Vatican Bank scandal, all ended up falling out of windows, being run over by cars.
It sounds like what happened after the Kennedy assassination.
It's almost exactly the same pattern.
Very scary, because that pattern repeats itself every time someone gets close to something in our world, something that JFK got too close to, something that the Pope got too close to. Right now, there were just last week negotiations between the European Union and the representatives of the Vatican Bank, demanding basically the bank clean up its act. The European Union is trying to apply common rules to all the countries, including the micro-states like the Vatican City and Monaco, and is threatening to remove the Vatican from the euro, which would basically destroy it financially if they don't clean up their act. A representative of the Vatican at the meal, at the luncheon where this was brought up, actually screamed, "How can you ask us such questions?" Now, this happened literally just before Pope Benedict's resignation and is now ongoing. What do you think the new Pope, who is an outspoken critic of the Curia. What do you think his chances are?
Well, when I saw him come up for the first time and be received by the public, I was struck intuitively by how much he reminded me of the demeanor, the calmness, the serenity of a John the 23rd, who created the Vatican reforms in Vatican II. And also the first thing he did, of the many firsts that this Pope has had yesterday, on top of being made Pope exactly on 3/13/13 at 8:13 p.m. Italian time, is that he opened his address to the people cracking a joke.
Amazing. John, we're going to take a little break. We'll be right back with John Hogue talking more about what's going on behind the scenes. Is the church about to self-destruct? We'll find out.
Unknown Country offers you more than any other website of its kind in the world. Join our community. Subscribe today. You need us, and we need you.
This week for subscribers, 2 new editions. First, my short story, Pain. I have read the entire story. It's available in audio form now in the subscriber section. The story was being written when I had my first close encounter. I didn't understand what had happened to me. The story is full of all kinds of unconscious material about the close encounter experience, and there's also going to be an analysis of it filed in the subscriber section shortly. Also, this week for subscribers, John Hogue goes even deeper. We're going to be looking at the astrological and numerological situation that is associated with this epoch change of papacy. It's a major world event. Make no mistake. It heralds coming change. We're beginning to see the outlines of a new world. Dangerous? Oh yes, for some, but not for those who understand and are prepared. So, join our subscriber section today. A spectacular treasure trove of extraordinary and valuable information unlike any other on planet Earth. Go to unknowncountry.com right now and click on the subscribe tab on the masthead. This is Whitley Strieber. It's Dreamland. We're talking to John Hogue, his website, HogueProphecy.com. John, why should we go to your website to learn more about this? I know the answer, but I want you to tell the listeners.
Well, right now, my homepage has a 25,000-word set of articles and illustrations and links to quite an overview of the whole evolutionary process that started since February 11th to the present day. Looking at the conclave, looking at the prophetic significance of Pope Benedict's resignation, which looks more like a graceful firing for the things that we were talking about concerning the Vatican Bank. I think the Vatican Bank was more the cause of his quote-unquote resignation, even more so than the sexual scandals.
Well, we're going to talk about those scandals in just a minute, and we'll see if you still agree with that idea after we talk about it. But go ahead.
The thing that what I am about to produce, and it's taking me a little longer because more and more information is coming in of prophetic significance to Pope Francis and how he might relate to the Malachi prophecies of Peter of Rome. And so I am in the next. By this weekend, I hope to have an article at the top of this mass of articles for everybody to read. And I thought it would be quick, but I am uncovering such a rat's nest, and also or a ratfinger's nest, I don't know, but and also uncovering some amazing things, including the prophecy of St. Francis dealing with the apostasy of the church. Which has some illumination. The astrology of this Pope also is very interesting. And to get back to the thread of what I was saying when I first saw him, I saw him with the demeanor of John the 23rd, but I also saw him being very approachable to the people, bowing, asking them for prayers, and that reminded me very much of John Paul I, who was the Pope before John Paul II, who suddenly, mysteriously died after a month in office when he was after the very same problem that still exists in the Vatican today ever since he...
That Pope Francis is going to go after.
Yes, and so I'm thinking, wow, when I look at the astrology and these preliminary studies, I'm going, wow, I wonder if we're going to see a repeat of a mysterious end for an authentic religious man who, by accident of politics in the Vatican, has come to roost like the bird that roosted on the stovepipe, a bird in the hand of St. Francis or on his shoulder is symbolic in most all statues of St. Francis since he loved animals. And there was that seagull standing on the stovepipe yesterday. I was watching him live. He wouldn't move for an hour. And, I mean, the omen of that is quite significant when you consider that that's never happened, in at least as long as these things have been televised.
You know, the lightning was weird. That happened when Pope Benedict resigned. But it was possible because, after all, it was a stormy night and it was raining, and the Vatican is not exactly low; it's a high building.
But,
but this is weird. This is not beyond. This is actually beyond weird. That seagull was there for an hour.
And on top of that, the first day when they went in for their first vote, there was another very violent thunderstorm with hail and rain. They were talking about. Fortunately, I was up to watch it. No one's talking about it on the media, but the skies opened up on everybody in the Vatican, in the square, and even the commentators were saying, "My goodness, that was almost biblical." You know, the skies of lightning. So it happened again. The storms hit. It's
as if nature is somehow aware or being used in this in some way. There's something, I sense it too, something terribly powerful is in play right now. Tell us a little bit about Francis's astrological situation. Where are we there?
Well, it is I'll try not to get into the complications of astrology, but simply, the fact that his pontificate was born on a 13th day of a 13th year, on the 13th minute of 8 o'clock hour, in the third month, all the threes and ones. So the numerology is very much the sign of reform and revolution. The fact that so many of the planets, as I forecast this Pope would have a number of planets, almost a stellium of planets in Pisces for his pontificate. So there'd be a lot of, that in layman's terms talks about somebody who's, Pisces rules the subconscious, the hidden, and the illusions that people believe are true in one of its teaching aspects. His role as a conservative, because he is a conservative, he's going to try to bring, like the prophecy of Francis, the church back to its true law and come out of error. And he's on a mission to do that. But he is up against some very powerful forces, and he better watch his back.
Well, yeah. Tell us about the prophecy of St. Francis, exactly.
The prophecy of St. Francis has 7 steps to it. And it is essentially, he was dying and he called his disciples together, and he basically talked about that their time is fast approaching in which there will be a great trials and afflictions, perplexities and dissensions, spiritual and temporal, will abound. The charity of many will grow cold and the malice of the wicked will increase. And it goes on to describe apostasy at the very height of the church, that the sovereign pontiff and the church would be in jeopardy, and that it was a time of great upheaval all over the world. Now, another point to insert into this about St. Francis is St. Francis is not just the patron saint of Italy, but John Paul II declared him the patron saint of ecology in 1979.
Right.
So So the fact that we're having the strange weather, the climate change issues, the lightning hitting the bird on the stovepipe are all signs, portent.
there is something really, really odd going on in this world. For example, an area of frozen waves were found off the coast of Newfoundland a couple of days ago. There are these strange booms being heard all over the United States, and as far as we know, possibly in the rest of the world too. Even things like the sounds of cascading broken glass, where there is no breaking glass, roaring sounds, the sound of loud explosions occurring inside people's homes. Linda Moulton Howe on earthfiles.com is keeping up with this. There are strange signs all over the place, John, on every single level, from bizarre climate changes to, quite frankly, very unusual and hard to understand UFO events on a lot of different levels, to some sort of new earth sounds that have been taking place now for over a year. It's an odd time. And now we have a pope who is profoundly connected to the whole idea of the environment and of the need for a healthy environment to continue to support billions of human beings. And we have also got, at the same time, one of Nostradamus's quatrains. And when we get back, we're going to talk to John about just what kind of a plague might have been referred to in that particular quatrain. We'll be right back. Graham Hancock's going to be talking about altered states, good and evil, parallel universes, and the future of mankind in his first presentation. But there are going to be two presentations. His second one is Message of the Gods. What did the past tell us? Our strange, disappeared past. There is a message being cried out from the depths of history and time, from a forgotten world. Graham knows that message, and he's going to tell us all about it. William Henry's two presentations, The Judgment Day Device Project, the race for the most powerful relic of all time. William is on that race, and he's going to have some incredible information from us in his first presentation. In his second presentation, The Path of Souls. We're in a matrix. We all know it. Even science knows it. How do we escape? William's second presentation, Mapping Our Escape from the Matrix. My first presentation, The Visitors, the Soul, and the Future of Man. I've come to a new place in my understanding of the visitor experience, of why they are here, what our future is, what the soul is, where we came from and where we are going. It's basic change for me. I'm going to present that to you. I'm going to tell you some profound and powerful secrets about being human, things that I don't think anyone has ever really known before, not with this kind of clarity. My second presentation will be a new kind of meditation. I call it a meditation for soul coherence. We live in a world that is lying to us and telling us we have no souls. We're going soul blind at a time when we need connection with our souls more profoundly than perhaps we ever have in history. We need this. So come to the unveiling, May 17th through the 19th in Nashville. To get your tickets, go to unknowncountry.com, click on the ad on the right side of the page, click on the ad. Don't miss this. And if you're a subscriber, take advantage of the $25 off coupon in our subscriber section. This is Whitley Strieber. We're talking to John Hogue. His website, HogueProphecy.com, where you can go for some of the most interesting breaking news on the new Pope anywhere on planet Earth. I guarantee it. As the next few weeks progress, you're going to find John Hogue putting up some of the most extraordinary material that is under the surface, behind the scenes, and takes us to places where we really want to go, where you begin to see the angles and edges of the dark labyrinth in which we wander. Children of the northern peoples, remember that prophecy from one of the visitors, you wander in eternal darkness. It's not quite as dark as that on prophecy.com, so don't miss it. Now, John, before we left the air, we were just beginning to talk about a particularly ominous quatrain of Nostradamus. John, can you tell it? You talked about it briefly on Coast, but I want you, there's a lot more to it, and tell us a little bit about this quatrain and how it may relate to the situation now.
This is Century 5 of Quatrain 49 of Nostradamus' magnum opus, The Prophecies, which he wrote in the 1550s. And it is one of two prophecies that set up the whole situation, the first being one that looked at the sequence of when there was a pope that was there for 17 years, there would be 5 more popes. And that leads right up to the Benedict's reign after Pius XI, who was 17 years in office. There were exactly 5 popes after that, and the one that was picked would be not too appealing to the Romans, that is the Vatican bureaucracy, and that was Ratzinger. And that is followed by another prophecy after he was resigned that may try to see Nostradamus give us a hint of who the next person would be. And he said, not from Spain, but from ancient France, Francis, will be elected for the trembling ship, the bark of St. Peter. He will make a promise to the enemy, who will cause great plague during his reign. Now, Francis was originally not, St. Francis was originally not named Francis. The name was given to him by his father, who then finally his full name was Francesco di Pietro di Bonamonte, I believe. And that what's a significant thing about that is that his full name, St. Francis's full Christian name, has Peter in it.
Yes.
So the prophecy looks like it leans more towards an allusion, a wordplay of France for Francis, because Francis means a Frenchie, from a French person. Francesco means French. So his father, St. Francis's father, who was a wealthy merchant, used to do a lot of business in France, loved France. His wife was from Provence. So St. Francis's mother is from ancient France, one of the most ancient colonized parts of France, which is Provence, where the Greeks and the Phoenicians built the Marseille and other colonies. So again, the first line is saying he's not from Spain, but from ancient France. Now, why he should qualify it by having to say he's not from somewhere has always been an intriguing wordplay for me, because you've got to understand, in the 16th century, when you say Spain, you're not thinking just that little peninsula at the end of Europe. Spain in the 1550s was a vast empire that not only had the homeland, but all of South America and Central America, and a lot of North America as part of its great empire. So that's all Spain. So South America is Spain. Argentina is Spain at that point. And so he's not from there, but from ancient France is kind of intriguing to me. It's implying that there's something to do with Spain or a Spanish-speaking person, but he's from ancient France, and it's a wordplay of Francis. And he's elected to a trembling ship, which is the wordplay for the code of the bark, the ship of St. Peter.
Well, it is certainly trembling right now for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, for a lot of reasons. And then the next 2 lines give us a glimpse into what happens in this new Pope's pontificate. And he will make a promise to the enemy, who will cause great plague during his reign.
Now, who would the enemy be, do you think?
Well, it sounds like he tries to make a compromise with the dark forces that are running the Vatican. Frankly, I don't know how. I mean, in a way, the Vatican looks more and more like Washington, D.C. to me, where it doesn't matter if you're a good leader or not. It's such a systemically corrupted organization that it just gobbles up all the good with the bad. And I'm wondering if he's just going to be overwhelmed trying to make reforms in an intractable situation.
I think that if the Vatican Bank's actual activities are disclosed, it's destroyed, I think that what you're going to see is not only money laundering, but that it has been used as a cutout by intelligence agencies from all over the world since it was founded in 1942. And in fact, one of the reasons it was originally founded in 1942 was to move money for the Nazis.
Yes.
And later also, I will say, for the Allies.
And the CIA.
And the CIA and other intelligence agencies. Maybe some of that money has to do with terrorism. It certainly has to do with the Italian mafia and drug money. It's a dirty mess. And that's why that official from the Vatican Bank was reduced to shouting when the EU commissioner began to talk about it opening its doors more. It can't. But if it doesn't, then the Vatican is going to be bankrupt because the bank will fail.
Well, there's also another side to it too, is that the EU commissioner is not standing on very steady ground financially either. The European banks are probably going to have their own major crisis this year, as soon as April or a little after, definitely by the summer, when I look at the astrology. So it is, European banks have done one thing that they do excellently well, and that's postpone disaster as well as reform. And I think the whole European monetary system is going to be in upheavals that perhaps in the shouting and the confusion, they'll leave the Vatican Bank alone because they'll have much more bigger fires to deal with first. You know, as Lincoln said when the British almost went to war with him over some incident during the middle of the Civil War, he surrendered. He gave the British what they wanted because he wrote one war at a time, please.
Yes. Okay, we're coming to the end of our time together on Dreamland. There is something known as, in the Vatican, as the relatio, or the narration. It is contained in 2 stiff, unmarked red folders. It runs to around 300 pages. It is in a safe in the papal apartments of the Apostolic Palace. It is the document about all that is wrong in the Curia. That is the findings of 3 cardinal detectives. We will be talking about that for our subscribers. So I have a suggestion for you. Go ahead and bite the bullet. It's not even very expensive. This is Whitley Strieber. This is Dreamland. John Hogue, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me on.
You've been listening to Dreamland. Be sure to tune in again next week. Dreamland is brought to you by UnknownCountry.com and our family of subscribers. Our news editor is Ann Strieber. Our science reporter is Linda Moulton Howe. Our webmaster is Daniel Stiegel. And I'm your Dreamland announcer, Brian Arnold. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week.